Hello, everybody. Welcome back to my channel, Eclectic Reads. Today, I want to do part 2 of my A to Z book tag. It looks like the other mic that I had was not syncing with my phone very well because it kept shutting off. That's the reason why I'm doing this tag in 2 parts. So if you haven't seen part 1, I recommend that you do. I have a lot of book recommendations in the first part. I'm holding the mic like this, not really for aesthetic reasons, so much as I'm afraid that it's going to turn off and that I won't notice, or that it's not picking up the sound as well. So we'll see if this works. All right, last I left off, I was on number 10, just finished. Since recording part 1, I already finished another book on Palestinians. This one is Footnotes on Gaza by Joe Sacco. This is another piece of graphic journalism by the Maltese American journalist who writes the history of the Palestinians in cartoons. They're very evocative. This book is very difficult to read because of its length, because of the subject matter. It is one that caused me to not be able to sleep very well at night, naturally, because this is Sacco's attempt at piecing together the history of two massacres that took place in 1956 in Gaza. The first part of the book follows a massacre in Khan Yunis, and the second part, which I thought was better, was on Rafah. This graphic work will definitely appeal more to people who are interested in the challenges the journalists face in trying to tell the history of events that have been buried in the archival records or lesser known, haven't been documented as well, as he tries to interview the Palestinians, many of whom are elderly. Well, they're all elderly, and they've had to experience a lot of disasters and suffering, and so dates blend in their head and they can't really distinguish one event from the other. I actually found it to be better than Palestine, even though I think that Palestine is definitely more accessible and the book that I would recommend for people starting out trying to learn more about the Palestinians and their oppression. Number 11, kinds of books that I won't read. Well, I don't really like reading books with too much spice, so I'm not going to pick up a book because of spice. I mean, if there is some of that in a book, that's one thing, but I'm not going to read, some of the more spicy romantasy or anything like that. That's just not for me. Number 12, the longest book I've ever read, that would be Don Quixote by Miguel de Cervantes. He wrote this book in the second half of the 16th century. It's translated from Spanish by Edith Grossman. Sorry if I keep looking at my microphone. It's because I'm afraid that the light will go out, telling me that the sound cut out. It hasn't. Yeah, it's fine. Edith Grossman's translation is incredible, but this book was definitely over 1,000 pages. I read most of it physically, but some of it I ended up listening to an audio. I definitely found the first half to be more engaging than the second half. In the first half, Don Quixote is funny and he's very endearing, whereas in the second half, he's actually a darker figure. And I really enjoyed it. I'm glad I read it, but I also don't see myself rereading it. Number 13, major book hangover because of, and I'm supposed to fill in the blank here. I would say that any kind of book that gets me thinking, that it can be fiction, it can be nonfiction, that inspires me to read further into the topic, is a book that has caused a book hangover. This is the reason why I came back to BookTube. I'll be honest, I don't always love filming videos, but I love talking about books and having a conversation about books with other people. And so, when I read books that give me that major book hangover, I'm like, I want to film a video about it because I want to hear what other people have to say. Number 14, number of bookcases I own. I don't really store my books very well in bookcases. I mostly store them in bins. There's these gray collapsible bins that I will stuff with books. I also am not really interested in having a book collection per se. There are some books that I want to keep, but most of my books I read and then I donate. And I also use my library a lot. Technically, I have two bookcases, one here and one in my family's home, but I keep most of my books not on shelves. Number 15, one book that I've read multiple times. Well, I'm not going to give you one book. I'm going to give you multiple books, of course. Well, Le Petit Prince, or The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, I read so many times that at one point in high school, I memorized the whole first chapter and recited it to my French teacher. I have also reread Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and Beezus and Ramona. Both books I would read whenever I couldn't sleep at night. And finally, I have reread Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift. The first time I read it, I was in 8th grade, didn't understand any of the satire, but had a good old time. And it took me about 5 times reading the book to really appreciate what Swift was doing. And I intend at some point to make a whole video about what I think that he's trying to accomplish with this book. Number 16, preferred place to read. My bed. I work on my bed, I read on my bed, definitely bed. Number 17, quote that inspires you. I have a quote from Moby Dick that has always inspired me. It is a passage that I will place on the screen where the whale is used as a metaphor to talk about how we should be temperate. Number 18, reading regrets. I don't have any reading regrets per se. Sure, there are books that I've read that I didn't love reading at the time, but I'm sure that they influenced me in some way, some positive way, even when I was having to read them for my PhD exam a few years ago. But books that I didn't read in my childhood, well, I can read them now. It's never too late. As long as you're breathing and can read, why not? I can read them now. Number 19, series you started and need to finish. I started and read the first 2 books in the Golden Wolf saga by Linnea Hartziker. This is a historical fiction that is set in the Viking era, and we follow Ragnvald and his sister Svanhild. It's kind of Game of Thrones-ish in its violence. I read the first 2 books and really enjoyed it, and then intended to read the 3rd book and never did. And what's worse is that I actually purchased hardback the first 2 books and then ended up donating them, which, okay, that was a choice. So I will borrow the 3 books and then reread the first 2 and then read the 3rd one. That's my goal. I want to do this year. Number 20 is my favorite question, my 3 favorite books of all time. Well, I have 3 favorite books of all time. Number 3 is Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift, which tells the story of Lemuel Gulliver, who travels around the world and visits some pretty strange and foreign lands with tiny people called Lilliputians and giants, Brobdingnagians. He visits a floating island called Laputa, and finally the Winums, who are a race of intelligent horses. And I have so much more that I could say about it, but it is my 3rd favorite novel of all time. Number 2 is Moby Dick by Herman Melville. Now, this is the only one I've only read 1 time, so I do feel a little bit uncomfortable saying that it is my 2nd favorite novel just because I've only read it once, but I was so blown away by it, and particularly the cetology chapters, that is, the chapters about whales, that I immediately picked up 2 books about the history of the whaling industry. Both books were by Nathaniel Philbrick, Away Offshore and Into the Heart of the Sea. Away Offshore is about the whaling industry in Nantucket, and Into the Heart of the Sea is about the whale ship Essex, which inspired Moby Dick's Paycod. And number 1, Le Petit Prince, The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, which I could do a whole video about at some point, but that would be my favorite novel of all time. Number 21, Unapologetic Fangirl For. I am a fangirl for things at different times in my life. I was a fangirl for Roald Dahl because I loved his stories at one point. I was a fangirl for the Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard because I read his works. I have been a fangirl for a number of different authors throughout my childhood and adulthood. And so it's really hard for me to say. I would say that I just enjoy the writings of anybody who gets me to think. Number 22, very excited for this release more than all the others. This year, I'm excited for the release of Mrs. Claus and the Very Vicious Valentine by Liz Ireland. This will be the next installment in the Mrs. Claus series, which is a paranormal cozy taking place in the North Pole. We have April Claus, who is a normal, non-magical human who just happens to marry Santa Claus. And she moves to the North Pole, and she keeps wanting to introduce American holidays into the North Pole, and it isn't very well received, so I'm sure there'll be another death in this one. Number 23, Worst Bookish Habit. My worst bookish habit is borrowing 12 books from the library and reading 2, and then returning the other 10, and then borrowing another 12. Yeah, I borrow a lot of books I don't read. That is a bad habit, I think, especially when those books I had requested on hold and other people want them. Yeah, it's a bad habit. 24, X marks the spot. What is the 27th book on my shelf? All right, my 27th book is Saint Joan by George Bernard Shaw. I read this play probably over a decade ago. This tells the story of Joan of Arc in her last days, her trial, and it's not historically accurate because Shaw presents Joan as almost a proto-Protestant, but I found the way that he presented Joan's oppressors as very realistic. That really made this play very memorable to me. All right, this person across the street is kind of looking at me like, "What are you doing? Are you filming me?" I'm not. I'm filming myself. It's all good. Why your last book purchase? Well, my last book purchase was Against Fascism, which is a poetry collection by David Novak, who is a booktuber. From the used bookstore, I also purchased Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf, which will be a reread for me, as well as Orlando, another reread, and finally the book that I am the most excited for, Flush by Virginia Woolf, which tells the story of a dog named Flush, but as if it's a Victorian biography. I am so excited to read this. And finally, Snatcher. Last book that kept you up way late. That's really hard. I usually stay up way late to just finish books that I have started. I would say probably the book that kept me up recently would be The Last Cozy Mystery that I finished. I listened to it on audio, and I also listened to it at the gym, and that is Shady Hollow by Juno Black. I would highly recommend listening to it on audio because all of the different animals are given different voices that reflect the animal species. So, like, when the sheep speaks, it baws, and when the bear speaks, it sounds like a bear. Like, I really love that, and I would highly recommend listening to the books on audio. All right, well, hopefully the sound did not cut out. Let me know if you have read any of these books. Thank you everybody for watching, and I will talk to you later. Bye now.